Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here. This is Golden Shovel's How to Incorporate Tourism into Your Economic Development Strategy. And Bethany Quinn's going to be going over best practices that you can implement right away. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We will be recording this webinar and we'll send that to you in a follow-up email with any additional resources as well. If you do have any questions, put them in the Q&A section of your panel, and we'll keep some time at the end to answer those. If they're relevant, we might pause to get those in a moment. So as you think of them, put them in that Q&A. We will be using the chat feature for some interactive pieces too, so make sure you know where that is. And we invite you to participate when you're able. I am going to hand it over to Bethany Quinn in just a second here. I suppose I should introduce myself too. I am Audrey Anderson, the Director of Marketing and Communications. I always forget that piece. And we've got Bethany Quinn here to present these best practices. She's our Executive Vice President. Bethany, take it away.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So some of you do know me. For one, we've had obviously conversations. Many of the people who have registered, we've worked together. Others of you have attended webinars where I presented before. But today, I don't feel like lecturing to you guys. I want to be a little bit more interactive. So there are going to be opportunities where I'm going to ask for some people to participate, and we're going to use your community as an example. So that means I'm going to be jumping around a little bit on my screen. So hopefully it won't be clunky, but bear with me if it is. I think that everyone will get a little bit more value out of this if we are more interactive today. All right, so let's talk about why we're here. So obviously, tourism is so important to our communities. It is an economic driver, and it's one that's becoming increasingly more important as obviously travel has rebounded from pre-COVID levels, and we are seeing an increased interest in tourism. So with 1.9 trillion in economic output, supporting 9.5 million American jobs, 2.9% of the GDP, you can see that tourism as an economic driver is not going anywhere. So one of the things I wanted to do is I do recognize, for one, that there are people attending today that are in the US and there are some in Canada. So I'm going to be giving different examples for both. But first, I want to start with, in the US, we're going to take a look at the economic impact of tourism in a couple states. So if a brave soul wants to put in the chat where they're from, we will use you as an example first. So this is a great resource if you have not been here yet. This is the U.S. Travel Association. They have a lot of reports that are put out on the travel industry, the tourism industry, and you can find some good data.
Our first answer, we've got Hope, Arkansas.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Brandy. All right, so let's go to Arkansas. Okay, so we can start by looking at this at the state level, and you can, of course, download a full report, but you can see that there has been a significant increase, right? 2019 to 2022, you are talking about a 14.8% increase in tourism spending at the state level. So that's exciting to see. As far as which district you are in, bear with me here because I'm not exactly sure which district Hope is in, but you can see how you can narrow this down even further, which is fantastic. So if we're looking at the state level, and then can you guys see my screen change, Audrey?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. So this is nice, right? Because you can take a look at your state and we're able to see how many jobs the tourism industry creates, which is really important, right? Because as economic development professionals, job creation is so key to the foundation of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then if you look here, you're able to see more information that is on a national level. So let's go back here for a second. And again, I'm not sure which district Hope is in, so bear with me. So again, you can see the travel spending per district. And let's take a look at the district report. So right here, we are still able to look and see how many jobs are created in particular state districts based on tourism. So if you're working with stakeholders and you're trying to make a case for why tourism is important to the local economy and why it's important to invest in tourism initiatives, understanding how much revenue is created in your state, in your district, and how many jobs are created is certainly a good place to start. So again, for anyone who is not familiar with this tool, it is free, available to everyone from the U.S. Travel Association. And of course, Audrey always does a nice follow-up, so it's linked in our slide as well.
I see a comment that the chat is actually disabled, so I guess we are going to have to just use the Q&A section.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Well, Brandy, thanks for figuring it out. Anyway, you put your information in there. We appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the types of tourism. So of course, there's buckets we're going to be exploring today, but really we're going to look at leisure travel and we're going to look at business travel. So for meeting space. So leisure travel continues to dominate. 80% of tourism revenue is from leisure travel. So leisure travel has already rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, as I'm sure many of you know. And I just put in an example of one survey that assessed people's willingness to travel this year. There are so many. It would have taken me multiple slides to list them. But YouGov alone found that over 70% of people reported they had plans for leisure travel in 2024. And you see those numbers pretty consistent across the board. I've read different studies, even internationally, that consider the fact that in the US, people are traveling actually even a little bit less than in many countries. So Canada and US seem to be pretty similar. People in Asia and Europe are traveling slightly higher, right? So bottom line is a lot of people are traveling and this creates a lot of opportunity. But I do want to talk about kind of the elephant in the room. And in my mind, that's the fact that you can't read the news and not see that some communities are pushing back on tourism. Not everyone wants tourism. For example, in Venice, obviously, they're charging day fees. In Bali, they're charging additional fees. In what was that place? I was reading about it. I was reading on The Economist just the other day. There was somewhere that's charging $100 a day tax now for people to come in. So you're starting to see some of these different measures pass internationally, especially. And I feel like that creates some opportunity to encourage more domestic travel, more travel within the North American continent, for example, as people are looking for places to go that are quite excited to have tourists there. So put that in the back of your mind, and I would definitely consider including in a tourism campaign the fact that, hey, we want you here, right? We're trying to make it easier for you to come here, not putting any barriers in place. As far as meetings and events go, they are only 20% of the travel industry, but still contribute significantly. You're talking about $119 billion to the economy. And companies are starting to send their employees out again, traveling and also having meetings. There was a survey with American Express and the Harvard Business Review, where 84% of organizations said that they found tangible benefits from business travel, meeting face-to-face with peers and with customers. So I definitely would not count business travel out. If you're fortunate enough to have a convention center in your community that maybe did not see a lot of activity in recent years, it's time to reinvigorate that marketing campaign because companies are starting to reinvest in travel. And let's talk about the economic impact. So again, I'm always thinking about if you guys have to go to your board and if you have to go to your investors, how are you going to make a case for anything that you want to do, right? There's only so much money to go around and limited resources. So ultimately, it has to come back to what do we predict is going to be the outcome, right? Are jobs going to be created? Is investment coming into the community? Does this improve our quality of life? What is the aim beyond just simply bringing tourists in? So here's one example, and I purposefully included this one because the Pennsylvania Farm Show Complex in Harrisburg is not in a big community. It's 50,000 people, and so it's not It's not a tiny community, but it's certainly not adjacent to a major metro. It's not, an urban environment. And I think it just demonstrates the fact that even in our smaller and more rural communities, tourism can be a major economic driver. So every year, the Farm Show Complex generates $100 million in economic impact. That's significant. Just one of their events alone has a $39 million economic impact, and that's the Pennsylvania Farm Show. So the point is that there are tourism opportunities out there for everyone. Don't have to be in a major city, right, in order to benefit from this. So first, though, you got to create your tourism strategy before you can really do anything, before you can make that business case. That is the first step that needs to be taken if you do not have one already. So let's just talk about some of the steps that you're going to need to take in order to develop that strategy. For one, you need to engage stakeholders and have a joint strategic planning session. So I do a lot of strategic work for Golden Shovel and our clients. And one of the things I'm always asked is, who do I involve? Who do I actually need to include in this? And for us, it's really important to try to include a broad group of people. For one, you need to get out of the echo chamber, right? An idea can sound really good to an internal team and maybe to the board, but if it doesn't have community buy-in and support, then you may be the next casualty of the tourism industry, right? With community members getting upset and trying to limit how many people are visiting. So it's important to open it up for the community to participate. And that includes your small business owners. It includes people that are dealing with transportation and planning, right? I mean, if a lot of people are coming into town, how is that going to impact things? Are there certain routes that you want to promote, et cetera? So make sure that you let people know in the community that you're going to be having these meetings, publish them publicly, and see who shows up and expresses interest in being involved. But definitely don't start a tourism campaign by doing it in a silo, away from everybody else in a meeting space in your office. It's just not wise, because if you bring tourists to the community and you're successful, everyone's going to be impacted in some way. And if they can get involved early, they have the opportunity to be impacted positively. Also, it's important to share information and resources. So share what you're learning, share what your initial findings are. You may want to have an email list where you're able to send information out to anyone who's interested. Of course, if you're doing a big campaign and there's capital raise, that's part of it. You probably want to have a website that can communicate those things as well. During this process, one of the first steps that you have to take is you have to identify community assets. And that's another reason why you really want to get a broad group of people involved, because there may be potential assets in the community that you're simply unaware of. So for example, it may be that some of your local restaurants were considering opening up a patio and having live music nights. If they haven't done it yet, you might not be aware of that, but that's something that could be incorporated into a tourism asset. If you're in more of a rural community, maybe some of your local farmers want to open up the farm and host events, things like that. Or even events that are being planned already in the community. You want to know what those are, because there may be ways to amplify them and use those existing activities to try to attract more tourists. You also need to determine your existing capacity. That's really important. So for example, what is your capacity on lodging? How many rooms do you currently have? How many Airbnbs? What are the camping and RV sites look like? Things of that nature. So what is your current capacity to attract tourists? For example, you may find that you have an event that is already doing very well and you want to use that as a big tourism driver to attract more people. Maybe you want to have a marketing campaign for that. But what if you are already at capacity for your lodging? If you bring people in for the event, then there's a good chance that they're going to go spend their money somewhere else, because they're going to have to stay somewhere else, which means they're probably going to eat at restaurants somewhere else in a neighboring community. So that might not be the best place for you to start. So that capacity question has to be key to your strategic planning. And of course, that's where you can start to identify any infrastructure gaps, things that might need to be put in place for you to be able to successfully attract tourists and benefit from the revenue they're bringing into the community. And then you need to develop a plan. Okay, so we know we're short on certain pieces of infrastructure and capacity. What do we have to do in order to solve that? And how long will it take? Who needs to be involved? All part of the planning process. When you know that, then you can get to work securing the funding necessary in order to close those infrastructure and capacity gaps and prepare to have a marketing campaign to attract tourists. But it's really hard to raise money and get the support of the community if you don't have those facts already in place, and if you don't have a clear plan that you can then tie back to outcomes, which of course is creating jobs, increasing the tax base, bringing investment into the community. Now, I will say, when you are looking at those outcomes and trying to raise capital, remember a lot of what you're doing to attract tourists can also help to attract families to your community. And we all know how workforce shortages are an issue. So if you're improving quality of life, keep in mind there are additional benefits there. Then as part of your planning process, you need to make sure you develop a marketing campaign that will effectively brand the community in a way that people will be able to remember. So important, right? You need to be known for something that people can latch onto and remember. And that allows you to create awareness and attract tourists. So implement the marketing campaign, celebrate the success, and reinvest back in the community. And that's a big one, right? A lot of times, if you're trying to get community support, it can help to be able to demonstrate to them that if we are successful, if we bring in a lot more tourists, we generate this tax revenue for the community. Here's how we're planning to spend it. Here's what we're going to do that's going to improve the quality of life in our community. So one of the things I'm going to do today is I'm also going to show you guys some new AI tools, digital tools that can potentially help you in your tourism efforts. So you'll see me incorporate these throughout the presentation. So during the planning phase, one that I wanted to call out is if you're going to conduct a survey, which at Golden Shovel, we conduct surveys every single time we do strategic work, in addition to interviews and face-to-face engagement. If you're going to do it on your own, though, going through the survey responses, especially if they're open-ended questions, which you need to ask in order to help gather those assets, it can be hard. It can be time-consuming, right? And you might not have the time. So if you use a tool like Zonka, they incorporate AI into their process and analysis. They can start giving you some of those summaries and make recommendations. I personally don't think it's as robust as someone actually doing it for you, but it is a good helper if you don't have the budget to hire a firm like ours to create a strategy. So keep that in mind that AI can be used to help you analyze some of that data. And AI can also be used to help you with some trend analysis, and we're actually going to show some examples of that in just a little bit. I'm going to take a drink of water. Audrey, if there's something in the Q&A, do we need to address that now or later?
Nope, no questions right now.
Okay, I just got a little alert.
Yep, there's one about the Pennsylvania Farm Show asking for links. I put those in there, but we will send out a copy of these slides as well, so you can get all of those links that you can see in here.
Perfect, thanks, Audrey. Okay, so one of the things that you need to ask your community is what type of tourists do you want to attract? And so there's kind of two ways to go about this. You can obviously start by having the conversation of, hey, who do we think is going to be the right type of tourist for our community? Or you can obviously conduct an assessment of the assets that you have and then look at, is that going to match the type of tourists and build out the profile that way. So there's two ways to go about this. But some of the things we recommend doing is just to learn more about your demographics, the different target audiences and their behavior. So again, we have links right here for some resources that you can use, which is important because you can learn more about them. You can start to build out that profile and determine if it's a good fit for your community. And all of these tools, again, are linked here in the presentation. So here's some examples, right, of different target audiences for tourism. Millennials, 72% of them prefer to spend on experiences over material items. So That's really important to keep in mind because they're looking to have adventures. So it's a great audience to target. With seniors, boomers spend a lot of money on travel, and they're more likely to spend more, like a higher dollar amount per trip. So with boomers, it's important to find ways to deepen their engagement with your community because they're going to be more likely to stay longer and to spend more. You have to give them reasons to do so, right? To help build out those itineraries that are going to interest them. Convention attendees, heritage travelers, and we have actually a list of, I believe, about 15 different potential target audiences, market segmentation in our white paper for you to consider. And here we have a picture of people in front of Mount Rushmore. You know, keep in mind, Mount Rushmore is not going to be attractive to everyone, right? So again, you can have assets in your backyard, but what type of tourist is more likely to want to visit? You don't want to waste your money advertising to target audiences that are not going to be a match for your community. So let's talk about some of these AI tools. So I linked 2 in here that can help with some of this market segmentation information. So one of them is Perplexity. Let's close down some of these tabs, guys, so I can take you to the right spot. All right. So I asked a question earlier. I wanted to know what were the most popular travel destinations in Canada for people over the age of 60 in 2023. So with AI, the more direct and the more detailed your question is, the better the information is going to be that you receive. So again, if you're looking for market segmentation, okay, this is going to be potentially a different audience than who might visit with their young children or people that are single and in early stage of their career. So Perplexity is great because it's going to give you not only an answer, but also the sources the answers were pulled from, which then allows you to assess whether you feel like the source data is sufficient to give you an accurate answer. And that's really important, right? Because with AI, you know, if it's good information they're pulling from, you're going to get a good answer in good direction. If it's not, then your information may not be 100% accurate. So that's why Perplexity is a really good tool. So you can see the recommendations as far as what has been the most popular, include several multi-day train tours that focus on the region. So this is great, right? Because if you're in Canada or if you're in the US and you're looking for ideas to attract seniors and you see that train tours have been incredibly popular, if you have any type of asset like that in your community, that's something that you could use potentially as a cornerstone for your advertising campaign and for planning out itineraries. And you can see that more examples were given as well. ChatGPT can also give you some ideas for market segmentation, but you can see that it's not quite as detailed and it doesn't provide the source material. So I asked for information for retirees that are interested in heritage and cultural tourism in the United States this time instead of Canada. And you can see that it gave us some ideas for consideration. So popular activities, for example, historical sites, museums and art galleries, cultural festivals and events, and several examples are listed here as well. So I feel like if you're going to use AI to get ideas for market segmentation, ChatGPT is going to be a good tool for you to spark ideas. Right? So I have these ideas as far as architectural tours. You know, maybe I hadn't thought of that before, and maybe there's opportunities to promote architectural tours in your community. So that's a nice idea, right? It just helps you with brainstorming. Like ChatGPT is your whiteboard. However, if you want something that is more detailed, that gives you more specific examples of the sources, that's where you might want to go back to Perplexity. But the reality is this information, it doesn't take you very long to get. So you may as well use more than one tool, especially when you're trying to come up with ideas that could appeal to very specific target audiences. But as I mentioned before, one of the things you might want to do is obviously see what assets you have that could appeal to different markets. And so if you go back here to ChatGPT, for example, asking for ideas on popular activities for seniors, and then you do the same thing and ask for popular tourism ideas for families or for people that are in college. You can then get that list and use that as your brainstorming tool to see if you can match any of those ideas to what you already have. All right. I also wanted to show you guys that you can use AI to help generate information on itinerary ideas, which is really cool and really important. So like if you get those ideas from ChatGPT, you can go back into AI. I'm going to show you this tool actually in a little bit. And you can then make specific questions of AI for things like the architectural tours, right? And see if you can get an itinerary to be generated in your community. That's another great way to see what's already in existence in your community. And this tool I'm going to show you later, you can see right here, even will come up with maps. So that's a really nice thing to add to your website. Okay, so talking about the assets that you need to attract them. So for one, you have to have a cohesive brand. We'll dig into that. You have to have lodging options. You have to have activities. You have to have transportation. You really need to make sure that everything is in place to make sure that if you bring people in, they have stuff to do, places to stay, places to eat, and you have enough to keep them there. So they're not just coming into your community and then driving back out. So I wanted to give you an example of a community that didn't have the assets they needed and found a way to make it work. So we work with Upton Economic Development Board in Wyoming, and they realized several years ago that they really needed to have a hotel. They had people that could come to town and maybe weren't able to stay there because they didn't have enough lodging options. And people that were traveling nearby, they are the gateway to the Black Hills. That's one of the things they branded themselves as. But people were staying in other communities because they didn't have a hotel. So they actually, as an organization, decided to solve this problem. So they were able to raise the capital necessary and secure a partnership to create the Iron Creek Inn and Suites. This actually just opened. So here is their hotel website, but this is a really big deal for their community. Nobody was coming in from the outside to get this done for them. And they wanted to make sure they had this asset. And so now they have the newest hotel near the iconic Devil's Tower, as you can see. So great job, obviously, to everyone in Upton. Another example of leveraging these types of infrastructure investments is in the Chisago Lakes region of Minnesota. They had some infrastructure investment that took place, and it involved reconstructing Highway 8, which then created more one-way streets through downtowns in their community. And that allowed them to create more vibrant downtowns that are fully occupied and serving tourists. So, those infrastructure investments, sometimes it's having to build a new hotel, sometimes it's taking advantage of changes that are happening to the highway system. Whatever it may be, the point is to leverage what you can. All right. Now, really important, you don't have to do this on your own. I always say that because I feel like we always have some people in our webinars that have big budgets. And if you do, that's awesome. I love that for you. But there's a lot of people on here that have no money at all. And they always say, okay, well, what can I do? How can I start? And so the thing you need to remember is that you don't have to do it alone. The community will often help you. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs and communities that we're seeing that have made an impact simply because they want to. So let's talk about some communities that have done that and how they have leveraged community partnerships to improve their tourism capacity. So in Asheville, North Carolina, for example, they have a tourism product development fund where they've been able to work hand in hand with people in the local community to actually create more tourism assets. So sometimes a small grant, for example, might be all that's needed in order to turn an existing asset into something for tourists. I love this example. I got this example actually from our partners at Resource Bank because they do a lot of community development work. Gloucester, Ohio has an example of a community member who just wanted to try to save the community, improve the community, and attracting tourists was, of course, one way to do that. But the community was on a downward trend and needed to be revitalized. So this guy, Jim Cotter, he came up with a Paint the Town initiative, which sparked an entire movement, and so many people volunteered to literally revitalize their community, starting by painting old buildings. They were featured on PBS, and they've had a lot of tourism that has come to the community as a result of that attention, and then, of course, their revitalization efforts. And when I talk about not having a ton of money, buying paint and having volunteers, I mean, that's an affordable way to start. Jim Boland wanted to attract travelers to Casey, Illinois. So this is just an entrepreneur in a community. And he decided that he was going to do something that is totally random in most cases, but has worked really well. He made the world's largest wind chime. Largest wind chime. So this is not like a huge capital project. It's something whimsical, right? But it has attracted the attention of tourists. It's 55 feet, and he has continued to do this work because it has been so effective. So they have a lot of the world's largest objects now in Casey, which includes a rocking chair, a mailbox, wooden shoes, you name it. And so tourists have flocked to the community in order to see this, and it's led to the revitalization of their main street because small businesses have been able to benefit from the tourist attention. So, I think sometimes we can get stuck in having to come up with a big idea, but if you have people in the community that are volunteering, entrepreneurs that have a kind of quirky, creative idea, it's certainly worth exploring. And sometimes that can just be the spark that gets things moving. We have a ton of examples in our white paper of entrepreneurs that have helped to close that lodging capacity gap. So obviously I gave the example of Upton, and if you don't have a hotel or you need more hotels, I'm sure that those folks would be happy to chat with you about how they planned and their success. But that's just not always possible for everyone. And so in that case, looking to local entrepreneurs to help solve the problem can be a great idea. So this is an example of entrepreneurs who created a glamping adventure situation in Wyoming. We have another couple in our white paper that was featured in Palestine, Texas, who has, turned this old home into this beautiful Airbnb that's just full all the time. It's not an Airbnb, excuse me, it's an actual B&B because they're operating it on ongoing basis, but they're full constantly, right? And they're able to attract people for all the different events, host weddings, what have you. So for a lot of people that are entrepreneurs in communities, if they know that there's a need, that the space would be full or potentially full, and that they have an organization trying to support them by attracting tourists, you may end up finding that there's a lot of people in your community that would be happy to open a bed and breakfast or create a glamping situation, what have you. So it's worthwhile to have those conversations. Another thing that we want to do today is talk about some strategies that have worked, like more specific strategies for attracting tourists. So we'll talk about that next. After I get a drink of my water. Audrey, is there any questions we need to go over first?
Yeah, so one of them is kind of open-ended, I think, for other participants. They say, in my region, I'm seeing foot traffic or high foot traffic, but lower spend. Is that something that others are also seeing within the economy? I don't know if you have anything to add with that, Bethany. Otherwise, if people want to add some answers to the Q&A, they're more than welcome.
Yeah, please do. Please do. We can all learn a lot from each other, so don't be shy. It's great when people can participate.
Absolutely. I'll also add that we created a LinkedIn group, so I'll invite everyone to that afterwards to keep these conversations going. Can I create that open forum? Another
Share
question.
resources.
Yep. Another question. What do you recommend to rural communities that have limited businesses in their downtown areas and empty buildings?
Sure. So going back to the first question real quick. So if you're looking to increase the spend in your community, that's one of the things you may want to spend some time on is market segmentation, right? So we talk about how different types of tourists have different patterns of behavior. So one of the things, if you really want to deepen the spend, is you may want to look at potentially attracting that senior audience and making it very clear the things that they can do and how they can spend money in your community, because they are more likely to spend more time in a community, to stay in one place or in a closer geographic region, and just to spend more money when they're there. But they might not necessarily be looking for those ideas. So you might have to be more active in trying to engage them, versus a younger audience who may be more likely to about their phone, go on Instagram, things like that. The tourism apps, for example, can sometimes be useful with that, if you can get somebody to download it and it can give them ideas while they're there for how to spend their money. Okay, and then the other question was, repeat that one again, Audrey.
Yeah. What do you recommend to rural communities that have limited businesses in their downtown
Yeah, so that's
areas and buildings?
actually why I wanted to show these two examples from Ohio and from Illinois, because both of these, you're talking about areas where their downtowns were not doing well. So they didn't have a lot of businesses in there, and they had to do something in order to spark interest in their community and generate attention. In one case, obviously, it was that downtown revitalization was just so impactful, and the community revitalization as a whole, right, with the Paint the Town initiative, that people wanted to come check it out. And this story is Casey, is building that first big wind chime. So the reality is that if you want to try to increase activity in your downtown, sometimes you're going to have to begin by demonstrating that you can get people there. So that way local entrepreneurs are seeing that there is potential. One idea for you to consider would be to develop an event that's really going to bring people in, and asking different people in the community if they want to host a pop-up. We've actually seen these in a couple of communities, and you'll see some of them featured in the white paper. For example, there was one community who did pop-ups along their riverfront area in the summer. So again, these are pop-up by nature is temporary. So it's not a brick and mortar, it's a temporary store, however that looks like to you, whether that's a food cart or a little gelato stand or a retailer where it's just temporary. So they did that, and they were successful enough at bringing people into the community who frequented those pop-ups that now many of them have gone on to occupy brick and mortar in their downtown in previously vacant spaces. There are other communities we've worked with where they have actually taken empty downtown buildings and they've made them permanent pop-up spots, for example, for retailers, which might mean that a retailer gets to occupy it for a month or for 2 months, right? It's not a long-term commitment. They get to put up their items in the window displays and just see, is there demand for their business in the community? And if there is, obviously they could be successful and open something permanently. So if you have those vacant spaces now that you have relationships with the landlords, even a few of them, if you could approach them about that idea of just allowing for some temporary pop-ups and seeing how it goes, and you combine that with bringing people in for an event or for some summertime activities, what have you, you could end up having a lot of success like these other communities have. And that's a really low pressure way to do it too, because for a landlord, they're not making any tenant improvements in that situation. It is what it is, right? If you want to come in and occupy that space as a pop-up and you're an entrepreneur, you're probably going to have to put some elbow grease in to make the space look, decent to do that. But that's part of the trade-off, right? You get free temporary space, you're gonna have to do some cleaning, put some elbow grease in. And it can really help your downtown look better, right? Especially if you're trying to bring people in. So hopefully that helps. But in our white paper, we have the community names and more information on how they did that. All right. And if you're talking about events, so again, some strategies to bring people downtown, events can work really well. LeGrand in Eastern Oregon, again, that is a rural community. And these are just some of the things that they do that can bring people in. There is a fitness craze throughout North America. People are trying to get back in shape. It started with COVID and it really hasn't gone away. So hosting fun runs, hosting half marathons, marathons in your community, that's really low pressure. And the running community is traveling in order to do these fun events. Usually they can last for a couple days. You can get the community to be involved by putting together some, fun run or marathon specials and really make a big deal of it. But as far as planning, it's not a lot of cost because you're not looking at needing to develop a lot of infrastructure or even putting up permanent spaces in order to support this. But it can help to get people downtown. Trick-or-treating, small business Saturdays, holiday events, things like that. Of course, everyone knows, but really engage in the running community. I would try that if you're looking for a low cost, easy event to start with. One of the things that we wanted to point out too is when you're looking at your assets, look at where you're located. You might not be a city, but if you're close to a city, there's opportunity to attract people who live there for weekend trips, right? Or people who are flying in and want to make sure they have more than the singular urban experience. Stillwater, Minnesota, I put that in there as an example. We actually, Golden Shovel had an annual meeting there, and it was a lot of fun. And it's a beautiful location. It was not far from the Twin Cities at all. Audrey, you actually live in the area. You could remind me how far I drove when I flew in, but I feel like it was maybe 40 minutes.
Yeah,
But
yeah, much or less.
yeah, so not far, but like a world away, right? A world away. Totally different vibe. Right on the water, historic community, art galleries, boutique shops and restaurants. So they have a completely different feel and an opportunity to bring people from the Twin Cities who are flying in and people who live there. So sometimes that connectivity is really to your advantage. But the key is to show how unique you are and how close you are at the same time, right? Because you don't want to sound like you're a suburb who has the same flavor and feel when you're not. Pasadena, Texas is another example. They're literally adjacent to Houston. So Houston, Pasadena. And so obviously people that are coming into Houston, they may not even realize if they're leaving the area, but Pasadena has a lot to offer of its own. I gave this example here with the Armand Bayou Nature Center. I mean, look at these cute little otters here. Look, I mean, this is so unique. You can be in Houston and you can book a kayak tour that's completely surrounded by nature, or take a pontoon cruise, or, an eco tour, all near a very urban city. Nobody would expect that, right? But you have to be able to focus on what are those unique assets that are worthwhile for people to leave this nearby metro to come to my community. And of course, the more unique they are, the easier of a sale it is to get somebody to come. West Valley City is another example I wanted to share. They are near enough to Salt Lake, again, that they can attract people who are flying in. And they created an interactive map. Hopefully this will pull up here. It's the only thing I didn't try before this presentation, so it might be a little slow with my Zoom. You're just going to have to check it. But they create an interactive map that really directs people to their parks and to their trail system. Again, we talked about how popular fitness is right now and being able to do those activities. So people can explore their water trails, or they can, ride their bikes, what have you. And it's just a really nice thing to do, to have an interactive map, because it can help people know where they want to go and to be able to plan their adventure. So here's an example of theirs. And of course, we build these interactive maps too. So a lot of our clients have them embedded in their websites. Oh, I already talked to you about these guys, so you don't need to see them again. Here's another example, right? If Christmas in Candyland, I thought this was cute. They have so many more activities than what you would imagine. It's not just Santa, but they have an entire village, which is really cool. And this is in Alabama. Obviously, this is fake snow. But that's the point, is they've made it fun and it lasts for a lot longer. It's not just a day, which allows you to, of course, engage tourists and hope people stay in hotels, right? So they're going to spend more money in your location. So I would look at this example with the slides and read the white paper, just simply as a way to inspire you to be able to take what you have as far as festivals and events and really draw them out, make them a little bit bigger so you can benefit from those hotel stays. Talking about Palestine, Texas again, sometimes the events are not necessarily obvious. They have the Texas Dogwood Trail celebration, and it's 20% more valuable to their hotel industry than any of their other events, which is a pretty big deal. Because if you're not aware, Palestine has the Polar Express train ride, which is really, really popular. So they are a place where people are going to visit for heritage travelers in particular on a regular basis. So what makes you unique? What can you turn into an event that you are known for, that you are branded? That's what you need to consider. Of course, this is another example of making something bigger, right? In Springfield, Ohio, they do what a lot of people do. They have outdoor concerts in the summertime. Those are a lot of fun. And even rural, very small rural communities will often have at least one outdoor concert in the summer. But in Springfield, they've made it so much bigger. And so they're really getting a reputation for this. They have their Jazz Music Fest in August, and they have so many award-winning artists and local beer, and they have events for the kids, and it's multiple day, right? So you're able to really get people to stay there longer. Promoting food and beverage tourism can sometimes be a really easy way to start if you don't have a lot of brick and mortar assets. If you can kind of make your own food and beverage trail, right? Like your own brewery trail, your own wine trail, your own restaurant trail, and create a passport type experience where people can come to your community. And as long as you tell the story and you really work with your local business owners to make it exciting, then you're able to really capture that audience who really is going to spend a lot of money in your community. Because if you are on any type of food or beverage trail type situation, you are physically spending when you go in. And sometimes it's just a small incentive, like, you know, one glass of wine or one glass of beer for free, what have you, to get people engaged. But they're going to spend. They're going to spend and they're going to stay. Milwaukee on a larger scale is a great example of a community that has become known for their food and beverage scene. If you're not familiar, Milwaukee has so many festivals, you might be shocked. I mean, like they have taken food and beverage festivals to a whole new level, and they even have a donut and coffee fest. So no festival, if it comes to food and beverage, it seems is too small for Milwaukee, and it's working for them because they have festivals like every single weekend of the year is what it seems like. And so people are just know them as that type of destination, and they continue to attract tourists. Art tourism is another example of what you can do regardless of the size of your community. I like to put in these rural examples because in my mind, it demonstrates that if you can do something with 5,000 people, you can definitely do it regardless of the size of your community. Stockton, South Dakota hired an artist to paint a large mural on a grain elevator. It's incredible. Hopefully this picture's clear enough for you guys to see, but it's absolutely stunning. And people have flocked to this rural community in order to see this large scale art. And we have so many communities that have done that, especially with public art right now. So painting murals on the side of buildings obviously can help with your downtown revitalization efforts. But then, of course, if you do enough of them, it also can create an art scene that's going to attract people. And that's in addition, of course, to your traditional galleries and what have you. But of course, if you're getting people to walk around your community to see art, they're going to be spending more money in your community too.
So I do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
First, are you aware of communities that have been able to work with Etsy to identify makers in their own backyards to fill up empty spaces or to serve as a base for these pop-ups?
I love that idea. I have not heard that idea, but it's fantastic. And now I'm going to start asking people about it. Have whoever put that question in there, have you guys done that? Because that's a great idea.
And then the second question, how do you build interactive maps?
How do we build interactive maps? So our development team actually builds it. And if you want to know how the code works, you're definitely not wanting to talk to me because I have zero skills in that area. However, I would be happy to connect whoever has that question with the more technical side of Golden Shovel.
Definitely send us an email if you'd like to learn more. So from an anonymous attendee. That's all we have for now.
Okay, perfect. That Etsy idea though, that's so great. Anyone who has done that, please let me know. And again, I will start asking people if they've done that. Cultural tourism is something that is really important to talk about, just because most communities, you're going to have something there. And it's kind of fun to have those conversations with the older folks in your community, people who remember. Go to your library, see what books have been written on the area. Maybe that makes me sound old by saying go to your library, but I still think that's kind of a fun thing to do, right? And your librarians may be aware of more locally generated content and books and guides that maybe just aren't always available online because they're not super popular, but still really informative. So you can find out of things that happen in your community and use those in order to build a narrative and create a story that can be used to attract cultural tourists. The point is that you have to gather those pieces and be able to create that narrative that people recognize and then want to be part of. And then you can also look at what can we do with any historic buildings in our community. In Medalia, Minnesota, I love how they've demonstrated that even a smaller investment in preserving history can pay off. So they have a downtown movie theater that attracts people from throughout the region that want that classic American movie experience because it's this beautiful, restored old theater. And what is great for them is people drive into town to go see a movie, and they don't just see a movie, right? They go see a movie, and before that, maybe they get lunch, or afterwards they get dinner. You know, if they're coming from further away, they're going to stay. So those are the types of draws that you definitely should consider. Eco-conscious tourists, this is definitely something that you want to keep in mind. Because 80% of people traveling say sustainability is important to them. I feel like that is another asset that you can potentially share for domestic tourism, especially if there is any level of train access getting to your community. Because obviously sustainable travel, if you're flying for 6 hours, that's not so sustainable. So think about the ways that you can tap into that. And then, of course, what outdoor type experiences you have that can appeal to people who want to have more eco-friendly adventures. One cool example, so again, I like to go small and big, right? The last slide actually touched on Costa Rica, of course, who's doing a fantastic job with ecotourism. But on a small scale, Gretchen Bee Ranch in Seguin, Texas, they are the only full-service beekeeper showroom in South Texas. So again, you talk about eco-conscious tourists that want to be more engaged in the environment and natural resources. They actually invite people in and show them what it's like to be a beekeeper and why bees are so incredibly important to our entire ecosystem as pollinators, which they are. So there's an educational component to what they do. They're actually showing people how you can actually work as a beekeeper, which can be a fun adventure for families in particular. And then in addition to those workshops, they, of course, give people the opportunity to purchase products. And if you're coming all the way there for that, you, of course, are probably going to be staying in the community and spending more money in the community at other shops and restaurants. But they've had people come from as far as California and Pennsylvania to attend these workshops. And it's just an entrepreneur who decided they wanted to do this. They wanted to create their bee ranch and then realize that they could expand by offering a tourism component. And that's why I brought up things like local farmers earlier. You may have some small scale farmers that would love to open up their own homes and communities, of course, to be able to create these types of experiences. Leverage outdoor assets, that's very important. If anyone has not been to Columbus, Georgia, they have a whitewater rafting course downtown. That's super cool. Not everyone has that. But usually you're going to have some type of outdoor asset that you can leverage, whether you are in New Mexico and can leverage hiking and ATV trails, or you are in Colorado and can, leverage skiing, or you're in Canada, right, and have such incredible natural beauty for hiking and skiing and biking. Whatever is nearby, the point is to make sure that you are able to develop an experience for a traveler that is more than them just using that asset, because you don't want them to come into your community to go biking, hiking, skiing, what have you, and then leave at night. You need to make sure that you're able to show people through robust itineraries the benefits of staying. Hey, Audrey, how am I doing on time?
We have got 3 minutes left.
Oh my goodness,
Or
you
we're done.
guys.
But
I've
We
been
can definitely
talking too much.
share these slides so they can read through them on their own. And if we need
Yes.
a couple minutes over, I'm available.
So there's an entire slide portion, you guys, on funding your tourism initiatives. Here's some information on ROI that you can use to show your stakeholders. I did want to show this real quick. We keep talking about brand that's recognizable. So to our Canadian friends, this was really clever. It's for all of Canada, but still is so clever.
Do you want to get away when things get spicy at home? Then Canada invites you to go on Maple Leaf!
Maple Leaf.
A breath of fresh air in a world full of stress.
How sweet is that?
Almost too sweet.
You could come de-stress.
Okay, so again, that's really creative and clever. The reality is if you're known for something, just play on it, leverage it. It's so much easier to do that than to try to create a whole new brand. So there's some ideas in here for branding, for communities who have done it successfully. Of course, you're going to need to have your tourism website with interactive maps, as we discussed, itineraries, the ability to book directly, mobile friendly and app integration is huge. Explore Troutdale is an example of something we've done that I'm really proud of. And then I will leave you guys with this before handing it to Audrey. I told you I'd give you more AI tools for planning things out. This is Mindtrip. There's a link to it in the slide deck. And this is what I use to create a 3-day itinerary for visiting Annapolis, near where I live. I wanted to test it out with everything that I knew so I could see if it gave good ideas, and it did. So the great thing about this is you could obviously integrate this into your website, and you could get ideas from here or just simply, and then copy them over into an itinerary format that works for your site. But it's just a great way for you to get ideas. And if you give really specific examples of the type of tourist that you're trying to appeal to, the itinerary is customized to their needs. And then these links take you to their various websites. So that's just one of the cool tools I wanted to leave you guys with. And of course, I did want to also show you that AI is still kind of rough in some ways. Like this picture of this kid does not look like a real kid. So you still need to have actual photographers and video creators. Like we create tourism videos. What's coming up with AI with that type of content? It's not great yet. But here's some more articles and resources. And I do hope that you guys will read through since I apparently talked way too much today.
We just got so lost in all the great information you were giving. So thank you, Bethany. If you scan this QR code on the screen, it'll take you to form to get our latest white paper on tourism. So definitely go and check that out. There's a link there too if you want to check it out afterwards. I also encourage you to check out Golden Shovel's news page. We're putting out tons of great content and articles if you've got a question related to communication and economic development. We've probably got at least one article on that topic. So there's a bunch related to tourism as well. So check out that news page. And then we hope to see you at future webinars as well. So stay tuned for more in the works. Again, thank you everyone for being here.
Thanks, guys.